Topic 3, operations strategy, managing performance. So invest in people as your most valuable asset. Well, they are your most valuable asset. And our quote on the next page tells us why. If you leave us our money, our buildings, and our brands, but take away our people, the company will fail. But if you take away our money, our buildings, and our brands, but leave us our people, we can rebuild the whole thing in a decade. It's the people that make the difference, because they're the real drivers of innovation, change, and all of that in a company. It's not the buildings. Buildings get bought and sold all the time. It's not the money. Money comes, money goes. The brands, the brand could be hot one moment and then cold the next. So those things come and go. But the people, your people are going to make a difference. So any company can invest in the hottest technology. You know, the hottest thing many years ago was Salesforce. And a lot of companies bought into that right away. And it is a good software, don't get me wrong. But it's not for every company. And a lot of companies bought into it because it was such a popular thing, but it wasn't a fit for their company. They had better systems that worked with their people. But because they switched over, they were kind of stuck. But now, if they would have listened to their people and actually evaluated their own processes, they might not have bought that software. Maybe there was a better one out there. So great companies and great dynasties and great empires, most of those were not defeated externally. No foreign enemy came in and took these companies out, or dynasties or empires. They were defeated from within. The people from within. You know, Julius Caesar was assassinated by his own friend, I believe it was. You know, that was from within. That was a major blow to the Roman Empire. So, if you invest in your people, they're going to make you a success or they're not. So, companies fail to live up to their own rhetoric. So if they say something over and over and over, it's rhetoric. But if they actually do what they say, it's not rhetoric. So we have a Dilbert cartoon here. All right. And the boss says, I've been saying for years that employees are our most valuable asset. How many times have you heard that? How many times have you actually felt that that was true? So our next slide here, it turns out that I was wrong. So that was the boss saying that. Money is our most valuable asset. Employees are ninth. So employees, he's saying, are the ninth most valuable asset at that company. So we have one of the employees asking or making a statement, I'm afraid to ask what came in eighth. So what was the eighth most valuable asset at this company? And the boss said carbon paper. I'm not sure if many of you know what carbon paper was, but before Xerox, in a typewriter, you would put a sheet of carbon paper in between two regular pieces of paper. And there you go. You had a carbon copy of what you typed out on a typewriter. So before Xerox and copy machines. So the company valued carbon paper above employees. And there was 6 more things above that, and then money. So this is a little depressing, but it's a cartoon, it's a comic strip. So Dilbert, if you go to Dilbert.com or do a Google search for Dilbert, you'll find these comic strips all over the place. The cross-trained worker. So there's many things that makes a worker better. You know, we're investing in people. And one way to invest in people is to cross-train them so they don't get stuck and feel depressed by doing the same job day after day after day. One thing we can do is we can enlarge their job. If they're a master at what they do, maybe they would be excited to do a little bit more. Maybe they could become a mentor to a new employee. They might like that. Empowerment. Maybe they can make a decision without having to run to the supervisor or the boss or the manager. Maybe they can actually make that decision on their own. Accountability. If they made that decision under empowerment, they should be responsible for the outcome of that. Because if they know that their decision is going to have a positive impact and they're accountable for that, perhaps there needs to be some type of reward for that decision. And if it's not a positive decision, I'm not saying fire or take any money away from the employee, but maybe a conversation saying, and understand where the employee was coming from with their decision. That way you can educate them and train them, and maybe that can make the next decision that much better. So cross-training, it only works. And when you give the employees, the workers or the employee, a chance to really make decisions that make an impact. If you're giving that employee stuff that's kind of like fluff, where it really has no impact, like they get to choose when they take their break, well, that doesn't really help much. Or they get to choose when they do a certain activity, well, that might not be enough to count as cross-training. But if you give them the real power to make a decision that makes an impact, like maybe they modify a process that they do every day if they're an assembly line worker. If they make a suggestion of a modification and it makes the assembly line that much more efficient, where they can produce more in a day, maybe that employee should be rewarded with a bonus or some other type of compensation. It doesn't always have to be a monetary item. Maybe a day off. Maybe basketball tickets to their favorite team. Could be football tickets. Could be anything. Find out what that employee values, the customer value. That employee is a customer of the company. So see what they value. So let's look at the manager. So our cross-experienced manager, we're trying to reach a goal here. We need to develop an appreciation for customers' needs and frontline workers' contributions. So imagine you're in a grocery store. Almost every employee in that store is a frontline worker. They contribute to that store's reputation. So if an employee is just stocking a shelf and ignores customers, is that really helping the customer? Did that customer feel valued? Not likely, but if you can encourage the frontline workers to contribute, say good morning or good afternoon, something small like that, or how can I help you? Something simple like that might make that person's day and increase that store's reputation. Gain a better perspective on what goes on in different functional areas. In supply chain, there is no walls. You should not have walls between you and other areas. You should know what's going on in accounting. You should know what's going on in marketing, research and development. You should know what's going on in all these different areas, because that might impact what's going on for the supply chain, and what you're doing might impact them. Supply chain, at least when I was working for the federal government, we were doing a massive amount of purchasing towards the end of the fiscal year. So that really hammered our accounting folks. So communicating with the accounting folks and saying, what do you guys need from us so it makes it easier on you? Well, I wouldn't have known to ask that until I realized how much of an impact I was having on them. So that's because I got a better perspective of what's going on in a different functional area. Learn the language spoken in each area. So if I know that a certain area speaks in acronyms, if I'm asking them, so how are the CMRs on the SMF today? I know that sentence actually makes sense in certain work areas. While that made no sense to most of you listening to this, that made perfect sense to a functional area. If you can speak their language, they're going to be more receptive to you because you're more accurate in your speaking to them. So you want to build stronger and more collaborative relationships with colleagues across the company. Not just your boss and his boss and his boss and everybody below you, but you want to have those relationships with accounting, marketing, research and development. You want to have all these because you never know what kind of information you might get that might help you and you might be able to help them. Knowing that research and development is building a project and they're about to send a supply order over to the supply chain folks for purchase, knowing that's coming and you have half your department out on vacation, you can maybe reassign some people or move some people over because you've been cross-training them into another area to help with that effort when it comes. But if you didn't know that because you didn't have the relationship, then it surprises you by landing on your desk. Well, you're going to be jumping through your hoops trying to get it done. So you want to gain an understanding of how suppliers contribute to product development, production, and distribution. Your suppliers are part of your team. Your suppliers may be able to recommend product changes or even maybe a better product design, which maybe they can say, okay, well, if this is how this product, if you change it this way, and then when you're producing, make this change in your production, that might be a way to reduce your packaging, which will mean less packaging, which means less weight, so it means you're going to have cheaper transportation costs. All this stuff works together. So why should we have teams? If we're going to be doing this, why would we have teams? Well, teams are the mechanism to design and execute strategy. It's not just one person who sits up there and designs it and then executes it. A team comes together. And teams reduce friction, shifting thinking from just a silo into a holistic. So instead of a straight up and down, you're talking to your manager and they're talking to their manager where it's just straight up and down, now you're talking and you're involving other departments, other areas. And now it's becoming a whole company effort. So your teams are going to make these complex and difficult decisions. For example, facility location, supplier selection, new product development, all these things. Choosing where a facility goes is not easy, but I'll show you how we'll do that when we get up to topic 9. Teams are responsible for difficult implementation initiatives, enterprise resource planning, lean operations, network rationalization, and so on. All of these things are not a one-man show. These take an incredible amount of manpower to accomplish. An ERP, enterprise resource planning, software, this usually is an all-encompassing system that IT will spend months or even a year or two trying to implement in the preparation and then finally switching it over. It's not easy. So lean operations, we'll talk about this in topics 6, 7, and 8. For quality, how do we make our products better by having less defects? So teams provide the foundation of our organizational design. Teams, however, are not always the best way. Slapping a team together and telling them to make it happen doesn't always work. Sometimes it's best to have a one-man or a two-man job. And sometimes it's best to have a team of 20. Depends. It's kind of like when you have a hammer. Everything's a nail. Teams are not a hammer. So don't think that. So let's think about how teams are appropriate. So we have the upside of a team. We bring a diverse set of talents and expertise together. Everybody has their experiences. We're communicating in cooperation. So we have a lot of different departments usually working together on a team. More rapid and more thorough decision execution. Because one person can't think of everything. So when we say more thorough, they're thinking of all the other aspects that maybe one person couldn't think of. Because accounting will think one way because that's how they think. It's accounting. Marketing will think of another way because that's how they think. MIS will think of another way because that's how they think. And it's rapid because you've thought of all these problems out or all these things out beforehand, so you're able to execute really quick. Decision ownership. Because the team came up with it and everybody gave input, you have rapid buy-in to the decision. And you implement it fast because you've already laid out the groundwork. The leveraged diversity brings new and creative options to light. Because of everybody's backgrounds, you have different experiences. And everybody can bring in something different. A woman has different experiences than a man. Well, the woman can make her experiences known, which a man would never have thought of because he's a man, and vice versa. A man's opinion might never have been ever thought of by a woman because of his experiences or her experiences. So more effective problem solving because of brainstorming, people coming together. Faster task completion because there's no fighting over whose turf it is. Everybody's working together. Organizational understanding. Everybody's going after the same goals. Everybody's in it together. So we have the downside of this too. The never-ending debate. No one can come to a decision. No one can come to an agreement. Or they want to avoid a tough decision because of how it might look on them and wasting resources. Think about if you've ever done a group project and you felt that you wasted a meeting because nothing was decided. Or you did all sorts of work and it actually was wrong because there was no communication. Or people didn't have an understanding of what happened. Groupthink. This is the big one here that you need to be aware of. Groupthink is where everybody tends to think the same way because that's the boss said something, the manager said something, so everybody's like, oh yeah, that's right, instead of challenging that and saying, well, yeah, that's a great idea, but what about, and so, go ahead and say whatever it is. There's all these different things on how to avoid groupthink, but people tend to do it anyway because of someone's social standing or position in the company. Social loafing. I know you've all had this in your groups. The lack of accountability leads to free riders and frustration. Has anybody ever had somebody in the group that did nothing or did very little and everybody else was frustrated with that person and there was nothing you could do about it? That's this. So finally, peer pressure. Supporting a team despite one's beliefs creates dissonance. So one person might strongly believe something different, but because everybody else is there, or they say, well, we've been here for hours, can't you just go with us and agree to this? That person gives in, even though they don't agree. That's peer pressure. I know you guys have probably heard about peer pressure growing up. Just say no, right? But it happens throughout the rest of your life too. So if you can get that taken care of now, you'll be on the right track. So when we look at all this, investing in people is our most valuable asset. People are number one, not number 9, but number 1. So if you can invest in people, create teams, but don't always create a team if you don't need it. Your company will definitely grow much further because your culture of your company will beat out any strategy you can have, because your culture will drive that innovation, that and the quality and everything else that your company needs to thrive in today's world.